Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 12th episode in which, rather than Hinata's father, a young Uzumaki Naruto foils Kumo's kidnapping attempt. However, he receives a severe wound in the process, jeopardizing his shinobi career. That is, if not for a certain fox stepping in and offering Naruto the Hokage to be a reward for his heroism. Witness Naruto's newfound power and unique perspective. This story comes from Story Seeker 7. Make certain to support him, her. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. Konoha, Training Ground 11. The sun had not risen yet when the members of Team 11 arrived at the training ground. Hinata was sitting by the lake, calmly watching the fish swim nearby. Sasuke had perched himself on top of one of the logs, standing on it with one foot. Naruto, meanwhile, was using his eyes to scan the training ground, trying to look for their sensei. At the same time, he had a large scroll opened and laid out across the ground. He was working on his Fuinjutsu. So, what if we change this line here so it can connect here? He points to a section on the scroll. Naruto heard a soft humming in his head. No, that won't work, Kurama said. If you did do that, time would flow normally in the storage space. Not ideal for storage. Naruto nodded as he got a close look at the symbols. Yes, I can see what you mean, he responded. Plus, I think taking it out would accelerate the degradation of whatever was inside. That would not be good for any food we would carry. Naruto looked over what would have looked like a mess of lines and symbols to others. All interlinked at what seemed like random. Truth was, it was anything but random. It was the sealing matrix of an average storage scroll. Naruto was trying to figure out ways to improve it. He looked over at another section of the scroll. So, what about this? That looks interesting, Shisui said. Naruto nodded. It is, he said. I don't get why most people think Fuinjutsu is boring. There are so many things you can. Naruto jumped up to his feet and whirled around to face Shisui. Shisui-sensei? He shouted in surprise, causing Hinata and Sasuke to drop what they were doing and look at him. Surprise looks flashed across their faces as they laid eyes on their sensei. What? He said nonchalantly. Naruto started. But I was. How did you sneak up on me? I had my eyes everywhere. You're sure they were everywhere? Shisui questioned. He looked around the training ground with a thoughtful expression. It seems pretty easy to get pasted them. All I had to do was just walk up to you. Naruto gave him an incredulously. You just walked up to me? Shisui shrugged. Well, sort of, he said. You were distracted, making it easier to sneak up on you. If I were an enemy shinobi, I could have killed you and your friends. In fact, he pulled out a black marker just as Hinata and Sasuke approached them. I did kill all three of you. It was then that Naruto noticed the black XS on each of their backs. Naruto felt a cold chill go down his spine. Not only had Shisui waltzed into the training grounds without them noticing, but he had marked each of them to prove he could have killed them all if he wanted to. Hinata and Sasuke had ghostly expressions as they noticed the mark on the other's back. Naruto gulped. You killed all of us? He asked, getting a nod from his sensei. Why? Couldn't you have just told us you were here? Shisui shrugged his shoulders. I could have, he said. But I wanted to have some fun with you guys. He smiled at seeing the blank stares he got. Plus, it seemed like a nice opportunity for a lesson. A lesson? Hinata asked. Shisui nodded. They taught you at the academy that you can't drop your guard, right? He got nods from the three genin. That you always have to be alert. But we're in the village, Sasuke pointed out. We should be safe here. Shisui's smile grew. Exactly, he said. But you should already know better than that. The three genin remained silent as they remembered past events. The Hyuga affair, the Uchiha betrayal, and most recently, the Kurama kidnapping. All proof that they weren't safe in the village, not always. Konoha is a safe place. But even here, you can't drop your guard. The life of a shinobi is one filled with paranoia, and we always have to keep an eye out. Kurama, did you know he was here? Naruto asked his tenant. I did, Kurama replied. Why didn't you say anything? Naruto asked. For the same reasons, your sensei stated, the fox answered. It was fun, and you needed to learn something. You can't always depend on me, Kit. There may come a time when you will have to use your own senses and instincts to detect danger. Naruto had a thoughtful expression on his face. It was something he would have to reflect on later. Shisui Zensei, Naruto said, getting the young man's attention. How did you get in here? I had my eyes scanning everywhere. The older Uchiha gave Naruto a coy smile. Come now, Naruto, he said. I'm a highly trained jonin and one of the best in the village. I can't really say that if I can't sneak past some floating eyeballs. Then he got a thoughtful look on his face. You know, that is a sentence I thought I would never have to say. So, what are we going to do today? Sasuke asked, looking between his teammates and sensei. Are you going to show us something, have us go on missions? Naruto got an excited look on his face. Are we going to rescue a princess? Overthrow a tyrannical government? Or maybe you're going to show us some super cool and powerful jutsu? More questions came out from Naruto. Shisui chuckled. Slow down, little guy, he said, holding his hands out. We're not going to be doing anything like that today. But I assure you we will get to stuff like that eventually. Naruto visibly deflated. Oh, he said. So, what are we doing today? Shisui smiled. Simple, really, he said. I want to see what the three of you can do. The three genin stared at their sensei. What we can do? Naruto asked. Can you explain? Shisui nodded. I want to know what you guys can do, he replied. How your taijutsu is, what kind of jutsus you know, and any other skill you might have. Stuff like that. The genin looked at each other, still seemingly confused by their sensei's request. Don't you have access to our records from the academy? Sasuke asked. Should that give you some idea? Some. Shisui said. But I can only get so much from a piece of paper. I want to see what you guys can do with my own eyes. Plus, the academy might have missed something. Like what? Hinata asked. Shisui put a hand to his chin. Like something you didn't want them to know. A hidden skill or jutsu you don't want anyone to know. At this, the three genin tensed up. Shisui smiled to reassure them. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. If there is anything like that you can tell me in private. But I need to know where you stand and what you can do. I'm your sensei, so you can trust me. The three genin still looked hesitant but nodded at the young man. So, Naruto said. What do you want us to show you first? Let's start off with some simple questions first, Shisui said. What kind of chakra control techniques do you know? We know the leaf-sticking technique, Naruto said. It's the first thing they taught us in the academy about chakra control. Hinata nodded. We also know how to perform the tree-walking technique, she added. Shisui nodded. Good, he said. At least I don't have to show you that one. Show me. The group of four walked up to the forest, where each genin picked a tree to walk up. Shisui had them do this several times to evaluate their control and reserves. Shisui was pleased by this. Okay, so that means I can show you the next step. The next step? Naruto asked. Shisui waved him off. Don't worry about that right now, he said. I'll show it to you later. Now then, on to the next question. What sorts of jutsus do you know? You don't have to give me specifics just yet. Just give me the rundown. Oh, and skip over the Academy 3. That should be a given. The genin nodded. Sasuke was the first to answer the young man's question. I mostly know some Katan jutsu. Like the Great Fireball and Phoenix Bullet. I know a lighting one, but aside from that, just some basic jutsu. Shursui hummed. But what I would expect from another Uchiha, he said. Though the lightning one is a surprise. Sasuke shrugged. Itachi tested my chakra, he explained. I have an affinity for fire and lighting. Shursui nodded and looked at Naruto. I know a few wind and water jutsu. Great Breakthrough, Water Whip, and working on Air Bullet. Also, the clone jutsu I know is a little different from the Academy version. The Kage Bunshin, Shursui said. Yes, I know about that one. You'll have to show me how many you can make. But from what I've been told, it should open up some possibilities. Naruto nodded, he held his hands out where a pair of eyes floated down to. I have some jutsus with my eyes, and I've been working on Fuinjutsu. Fuinjutsu, Shursui repeated. Should be interesting. Is that all you want to tell me for the moment? Naruto nodded. Shursui glanced over at Hinata. All right, little lady. You're last. Hinata shyly nodded. I know some ninjutsu, she said. Like Water Needle and Earth Dome, do you have an affinity for water? And earth? Shursui queried. Hinata nodded. So, we got all 5 elements here, nice. Hinata continued with her rundown. Aside from those, I mostly know clan jutsu, and, she paused momentarily. And I have been working on medical jutsu. I already know the mystical palm. So, you'll be the team medic, Shursui said. Then closed his eyes as he processed what he had learned. Sounds like we got a wide range of abilities to work with. Which should be good what I have in mind for you guys. What do you have in mind for us? Sasuke asked. Don't worry about it right now, Shursui said. I'm starting to understand what you guys can do. Here in a moment, you all will have a private session with me where you can detail your skill set. Including anything you want to keep hidden, the 3 genin nodded. Alright, then, let's get on to the next question. How would you rate your taijutsu skills? Naruto scratched the back of his head. I won't say mine is bad, he said honestly. He knew his skills were better than most of his class. But he knew he couldn't hold a candle next to Sasuke and Hinata. But I'm definitely the worst on this team. Shursui smiled at the boy. Don't sweat it, he said. You don't have to be the best at everything, just the stuff you're good at. Naruto felt a hand land on his shoulder. It was Hinata giving him a reassuring smile. He turned his head towards her and nodded. Thanks, he said. Then faced Shursui. Hinata spoke next. I'm well versed in my clan's taijutsu, she said. The Juken. I was in the top ranking of my class when it came to taijutsu. I was close behind her, Sasuke added. I know the Uchiha style of taijutsu like the back of my hand. Shursui hummed. I wouldn't say that, he said. There are some stuff you have yet to learn. But I do see where you're coming from. From the sounds of it, I got 2 students who can specialize in taijutsu, while the third is good enough to hold his own. But words can only tell me so much. I want to see the 3 of you in action. The 3 genin looked at each other. Do you want us to come at you? Naruto asked. Shursui shook his head. No, he said. Nothing like that. Not today, anyway. I want each of you to spare with each other. The genin nodded their heads, showing they understood what he wanted. Shursui-sensei, Hinata says. Since there are 3 of us, how should we pair off? Naruto thought it was a good question. With the three of them, either one of them would have to fight twice, or all of them would. He turned his head to face Shui to see what kind of answer he would give. There will be 3 spars, Shui said. First, it will be Naruto versus Hinata, then Naruto versus Sasuke, and finally Sasuke versus Hinata. Naruto, you're going twice in a row first since I know you have the most stamina. This way, Hinata can have a moment to rest. But I won't, Sasuke grumbled under his breath. Shui smiled at his cousin. Your stamina is pretty good, too. Sasuke. So, you should be in good enough condition to face off against her, he clapped his hands together. All right then, let's get to it. Shui guided them to the middle of the training ground, where they found large circles outlining arenas for taijutsu. Naruto and Hinata stepped into one, taking opposite sides. Shui and Sasuke stood outside to watch. Now remember this a spare, not a deathmatch, Shui said. I don't want you hurting each other. At the same time, I do want to see what you can do. So, don't hold back too much. Got that? Naruto and Hinata nodded. Good, then begin. Both genin took their respective taijutsu stances and waited for the other to act. After a moment, the two started to move around the arena, watching the other carefully. Naruto notices the moment of uncertainty in Hinata's eyes. He knew what she was thinking. She didn't want to hurt him. Naruto smiled and nodded at her, telling her it was okay. Hinata's eyes widened just a little bit, and she nodded. Not a moment later, she charged at him. Naruto stopped in his track and took a defensive stance, waiting for the Hyuga girl to close the distance. When she did, she threw a palm out. That Naruto noted was glowing faintly at the fingertips. Naruto quickly deflected the blow, then did the same with the second strike that came after. More palm strikes came from Hinata, all aimed at his chest or arms. Naruto knew better than to take any hits. With the Juken, any hit that got in would close off a chakra point. With each point closed off, he would have less and less access until he couldn't draw on his chakra anymore. So, the best strategy was to either parry the strikes or dodge them altogether. Naruto wasn't a particularly nimble fighter, so his best bet was to parry Hinata's attacks and dodge where he could. But Hinata was quick and flexible. Her attacks came in fast and precisely. Even as Naruto deflected most of them, he felt some of them slip through in the form of prickling feelings in his arms and shoulders. Already, Naruto could feel a little less of his chakra coursing through his body. Not to say that Naruto was on the defensive or in trouble. In fact, he managed to get some good blows at Hinata that forced her to slow her offensive. Hinata may be the quicker and more nimble of the two, she even had a highly regarded taijutsu form in her arsenal, but Naruto had stamina. A lot of it, and Hyugas were not known for their stamina, so they preferred to end their fights quickly. If Naruto could keep his defense up long enough, Hinata would tire out, leaving her open. Hinata knew this too. After almost a decade of living together, training, and sparring against one another, they knew each other's tells. They knew what the other was thinking. Naruto could tell that Hinata was getting tired now. Her palm strikes were coming slower now and were not as precise as before. Naruto smiled, finally seeing his chance. As soon as he deflected another palm strike, he sent one out at Hinata, aiming for her lower abdomen. Hinata quickly pulled herself away from Naruto, then moved to the side, avoiding a hit to the shoulder. Naruto kept his offensive up, forcing Hinata to rapidly backpedal. Even on the defensive like this, Hinata was still the nimbler of the two, ducking and weaving through Naruto's attacks. Even getting in a few good hits on Naruto, hoping to break his offense. But it wouldn't happen, as Naruto had the advantage now and wasn't about to let go. Hinata took a step back, avoiding a palm strike to her chest. Then her eyes widened when Naruto spun around and shot his leg out. Hinata didn't have enough time to react, so she did the only thing she could. She held her arms out to block the leg coming at her side. Naruto's leg impacted up against Hinata's arms, causing a small cry to escape her. For a moment, Naruto felt something tug at his chest. He ignored the feelings and pressed on with his attack. The impact of the attack was too much for Hinata, as her arms gave way. She was sent to the ground, catching herself with her battered arms. Hinata tried to make a move to get up but stopped when she found a palm just inches away from her face. Naruto looked down at her and smiled. Hinata sighed and relaxed her posture. "I concede," she said. Naruto nodded and loosened his shoulders up. He held a hand out for Hinata. The girl blushed but took his hand. "You okay?" he asked her. After a moment, she nodded, giving him a smile. Naruto nodded and turned his attention to Shisui. "So, how was that?" Shisui looked at them. "Not bad," he said. "Naruto, you put up a solid defense and outlasted your opponent long enough to go on the offensive. But I think your form could use some work. There was some waist movement there, and you could have ended the fight sooner." Naruto nodded happily at the praise he got, taking note of the criticism. "I'll try to work on that," he said. Shisui nodded. "Don't worry, it's more to do with lack of experience, I think," he said. "We can fix that soon enough." Then he turned his attention to Hinata. "As for you, Hinata," Hinata started to tap her fingers together and retreated into her coat. Naruto frowned and took a protective step in front of her. An apologetic expression passed across Shisui's face. "You did great, too." Hinata perked up and looked at him with a surprised look. "Unlike Naruto, your form was good. I would even say flawless. You were precise and wasted no energy. You took advantage of every opening you could. What held you back was your lack of stamina and power to overpower your opponent's defenses. With the former, some training should be able to help out with that." Hinata nodded, with a mild blush on her cheeks. "Thank you, Shisui-sensei," she said. "I'll think about what you said." Shisui then placed a hand on his chin. "Actually, there was something else I noticed," he said. "While your form was good, it differed from the normal Juken. Did you modify it?" Hinata looked away for a moment as uncertainty flashed across her face. Naruto nodded at her, telling her it was okay. She looked back at Shisui and nodded. "I did," she said. "I'm not particularly good with the traditional form of the Juken. My body is more flexible than most Hyuga." Naruto nodded. "The normal Juken is too rigid for her," he explained. "So, she's been using a modified version of it. One that's a little more flexible than the other. Although the Hyuga elders don't like it." Shisui snorted. "Then it's a good thing I'm not one of them," he said. "It is interesting to know now. I would encourage you to keep using this form and even expand on it. If you need help with that, you can always come to me. I might not be able to help, but I know some taijutsu specialists who might." Hinata had a small smile on her face. "Thank you, sensei," she said. "All right then," he said, turning around to face Sasuke. "I think that's enough talking. Let's get to the next round. Sasuke, you're up." Sasuke nodded and walked into the arena. "Hinata, take this moment to rest until I call you up." Hinata stepped out of the arena and stood next to Shisui. Naruto and Sasuke took opposite ends of the arena. At their sensei's signal, the sparring match began. Unlike with his match with Hinata, Naruto didn't have to wait long. Almost immediately, Sasuke launches himself at Naruto. Naruto parried the first attack that came from the Uchiha boy and then blocked the next that quickly followed. Another difference here was that Naruto could afford to take hits from Sasuke since none of his attacks would block off chakra points. But he couldn't take the hits forever. The Uchiha taijutsu style was precise, like the Juken, but had more power and speed behind it. It was meant to overwhelm their opponents with quick, powerful strikes. Sasuke kept up his assault on Naruto, and he didn't focus on one angle of attack. Sasuke moved around Naruto, throwing palm strike after palm strike and even mixing some leg movement in the hopes of finding an opening to exploit. Naruto, though, managed to keep up with the Uchiha boy. He deflected the strike that would have gone for his throat. He grabbed Sasuke's arm in the same motion as it shot out at his shoulder. Sasuke's eyes widened as he realized the trouble he was in. Before he could react, Naruto shot his free arm out and hit him in the chest. Sasuke was sent stumbling back as Naruto let go of his arm. Naruto pressed on his advantage and charged at Sasuke. Closing the distance, Naruto sends out another palm strike to his stomach. Sasuke had mostly recovered and twisted his body around to avoid the attack. Naruto used the momentum to turn himself around and swung his arm out. Sasuke used his arm to take the hit. Then used his free arm to send a strike at Naruto. He parried the attack, then ducked below Sasuke and swept his leg out. Sasuke saw the attack coming and jumped over the attack, and brought a hand down on Naruto. Naruto moved back and jumped up at Sasuke, meeting him blow for blow. Their match would continue as the boys would switch between going on the offensive and defending on the turn of a dime. Sasuke grabbed Naruto's arm, holding it up, and sent a palm strike to his chest. Naruto used his free arm to send a punch to Sasuke's chin. "That's enough," Shirsue's shout caused them to stop. Naruto's fist stopped just short of Sasuke's chin. Naruto felt Sasuke's hand on his stomach. Both boys were out of breath as they looked at each other, wondering if the other would continue. Then Sasuke smiled, took his hand off Naruto's stomach, and let his arm go. Naruto pulled his fist away and lowered his now free arm. Both boys nodded and looked at their sensei. "That was a good match," Shisui said. "Naruto, what I said about your match with Hinata still stands. Good solid defense, but your form needs work. You also kept up a good solid offense. I could see the power behind your blows. Work on your precision more, and I'm certain you'll be a juggernaut in no time." Naruto nodded, again happy for the praise and taking the criticism to heart. Shisui then looked over at Sasuke. "Sasuke, like Hinata, your form was good," he said. "You executed your attacks with precision and speed. You've taken quite well to the Uchiha style of fighting." Sasuke rubbed the back of his head, a slight blush lighting his cheeks. "Thanks," he said. "That said, while you were good, your form can still use some work," Shisui explained. "Your attacks weren't as clean as they could have been, and you could have been faster. If you had been a little quicker and put some power into your blows, you could have kept Naruto on the defensive. But that's something we can work on later. Get ready for your match with Hinata." He looked at the Hyuga girl. "Hinata, are you ready?" "Hi," Hinata said with a nod. Shisui nodded back. "Naruto, step out for now," he said. Naruto nodded and started to walk out of the arena. He walked past Hinata as she entered. "Good luck, Hinata-chan," he said to her. Hinata didn't pause or turn to acknowledge him. But he did see the faint smile. Naruto stood next to Shisui, facing the arena. Hinata and Sasuke stood at opposite sides of the arena, both taking their clan's respective fighting stances. "You know," Shisui said. "People would pay good money to see a match like this," Naruto smiled. Now Naruto was the one to watch. He thought this would be an interesting sparring match. In their last matches, Hinata and Sasuke had been pitted against an opponent who could outlast them in terms of stamina. Someone who, no matter how many times they were knocked down, would always get back up. For this match, the two would face an opponent whose style was similar but different. Both forms of taijutsu relied on precision and taking the opponent out quickly. However, the Juken was more defensive, whereas the Uchiha style was geared towards overwhelming offensives. It would be interesting to see which was better. As expected, Sasuke was the first to attack. He charged at Hinata and lashed out with a series of palm strikes aimed at her upper body. Hinata, meanwhile, blocked and deflected them all. Sasuke tried to maneuver around Hinata to try to find a weakness in her defenses. But with her Juken, the Hyuga girl was perfectly suited for a defense in a circular motion. She remained still even as Sasuke pressed his attack on her. She blocked, parried, and shifted her body just enough so Sasuke missed. All the while, she never moved from her spot. Sasuke, on the other hand, looked like he was getting frustrated with the lack of progress he was making. He ducked under Hinata and swept his legs out to trip the girl. But she quickly stepped over the attack. Hinata then shot out a palm strike down at Sasuke, who leaped back from the attack and shot back up to his feet. The fight shifted. Hinata charged at Sasuke and shot out another palm strike. Sasuke lifted his arm to block the attack. A mistake, Hinata's palm strike quickly turned into a series of quick jabs at Sasuke's arm. Sasuke's eyes widen as he realizes his mistake, but too late to act. His arm fell to the side as Hinata sent out more jabs at his shoulder. Sasuke tried to pull himself away from Hinata, but with the weight of his arm dragging him down, he couldn't get out. Sasuke then attempted to send a palm strike out at Hinata with his other arm. But that only gave the girl the opportunity she needed. Hinata sidestepped the attack and jabbed at the arm before Sasuke could pull it back. A moment later, Hinata held her palm before Sasuke's face. "Concede," she said. "I've blocked off all the chakra points in your arms. In this condition, you can't fight me." Sasuke frowned, looking like he wanted to argue, but a moment later, he nodded. "I concede," he said. Both opponents relaxed and bowed to the other. Next to Naruto, Shisui clapped his hands together. "Well done, you two," he said. "What I said before still stands. Both of you have good forms and have little waste energy when you act. My critiques remain the same. Both of you need to work on your stamina and putting more power behind your blows. Understood?" Both genin nodded. "Hi." Naruto walked out to stand next to his friends. "So, does that give you an idea of what we can do?" Shisui nodded. "It does," he said. "I'm getting a general idea of what the three of you are capable of. I'll learn more as time goes on." Sasuke had a tight frown on his face. "Why are you making us do this?" he asked. "Shouldn't you be training us right now?" "I am," Shisui said. "But I need to have an idea of what you can do before I can start your training. I need to see what you're good at and what you need to improve in. I know I have academy reports and the good word of your parents or caretakers. But that can only tell me so much." Sasuke nodded, satisfied by the answer. Naruto was the next to speak. "So, what's next?" he asked. "Individual assessments," Shisui said. "I'll take one of you one by one into a private section of the training ground. There I want you to tell me and demonstrate in detail everything you can do. That includes anything that you've been working on in private. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone, not even your teammates, if you don't want that. But I do want to know. I can't help you grow if I don't know." The three genin nodded nervously. They weren't eager to expose their secrets but understood where their sensei coming from and hoped he could be trusted to keep their secrets. "Sasuke, you'll go first," Shisui said, pointing to his cousin. "Hinata, I want you to work on your stamina while we're gone. Run laps around the training ground until we get back." "Hi, sensei," Hinata said, then ran off. Shisui turned his attention to Naruto. "Naruto, I want you to work on your chakra control. Use the tree climbing technique and the leaf sticking technique together. You should aim to walk up and down a tree without your leaf falling off." Naruto nodded and started to walk off to a nearby tree. "Oh, Naruto," Shisui said, stopping him. "No spying on us. I don't want to catch any of your eyes peeking at us. Understood? Naruto nodded. He wasn't planning on doing that anyway. But he knew it was best to say it aloud. I won't, Shisui-sensei. Shisui nodded. He then took Sasuke into the forested area of the training ground and out of Naruto's sight. Secluded area. Sasuke was nervous. This was his first day as an official genin under the tutelage of a jonin. Before the team assignments, he didn't know what kind of sensei he and his team would get. His only expectations were they had to be strong and knowledgeable. Never did he expect that his jonin sensei would be his cousin Shisui. Today Sasuke had expected harsh training that would make him and his teammates stronger. He didn't think the first they would have to do was demonstrate what each of them could do. Thinking about it, Sasuke knew it made sense. His jonin sensei needed to know what he could do and where he stood in terms of his skills to figure out what his training would be. In some ways, it was already helping Sasuke. In his head, Sasuke was going over everything he knew, how well he knew them, and what he needed to work on. The two Uchiha stopped in a small clearing in the woods. Shisui turned around to face Sasuke. All right, Sasuke, he said. Time to tell me what you know. What jutsu do you have, any ones you're working on? What other skills do you know or are working on? That sort of stuff. Sasuke nodded. Sure, he said. But first, mind if I ask a few questions? Shisui nodded. Go ahead, he said. I'm your sensei. You're supposed to ask me questions. How else am I going to teach you? How come you didn't tell anyone you were becoming a jonin sensei? Sasuke asked. And did you know you would have my friends and me? Shisui crossed his arms. I wanted this to be a surprise, he said. I didn't even tell Itachi until the day before. You should have seen the look on your brother's face. He thought I was joking. And yes, I did know who I was getting on mine. In fact, I requested you guys. You wanted us? Sasuke said. Why? Shisui closed his eyes and took a breath. That might take some explaining, he said, opening his eyes. You remember when our clan almost tore itself apart? How could Sasuke forget? He nodded. During that night, your brother told me to protect you above anyone else. Yes, I know your mother was there, and Itachi did want me to protect her. But I suspect that if it came down to a choice between you and your mother, Itachi would want me to choose you. Sasuke shifted around uncomfortably. He didn't like to dwell on that night. But this was something new to him. What if it did come down to that? What if Shisui had been forced to choose between him and his mother? Or rather him over his mother? Shisui noticed his thoughts. I wouldn't dwell on it, he suggested. That never happened, and for that, I'm thankful. That night, most of my thoughts centered on protecting you. Sasuke, you were very brave that night, you know that? Sasuke nodded. But at the same time, you were something of a mess. Your whole body was trembling, and I could see the fear in your eyes. That night was something no kid should go through. I wanted to protect you and keep you safe, not just for that night but for all the days that came after. So that got me thinking, how could I best protect you? I knew you wanted to become a shinobi, which would make keeping you safe hard. So how was I going to protect you then? Surprisingly, the only thing that came to mind was by teaching you. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. Teaching me? Shisui nodded. Yes, it was then that I knew I wanted to become your jonin sensei, Shisui said. That way, when you became a genin, I could protect you in the best way possible by teaching you. As your jonin sensei, I would be expected to teach you everything I know and to guide you on your way to becoming a shinobi of Konoha. I would give you all the skills and knowledge you would need to protect yourself while out on missions if something happens. Sasuke was speechless. He started, finding it hard to put his thoughts into words. I never knew. It's something I've been keeping to myself for a while, Shisui said. Itachi might have suspected that something was up. Though he never imagined I wanted to be your Jonin sensei. But now I am. I swear to you that I will protect you the best way I can. By teaching you everything you need to know to survive the shinobi world and become a great shinobi as well. Sasuke nodded. Thank you, Shisui-sensei, Sasuke said. Then frowned as a thought occurred to him. You're not going to show favoritism towards me, are you? Hinata and Naruto deserve to be thought too. Shisui smiled. He ruffled Sasuke's hair. Of course. Not, he said. They're my genin students too. So, I'm expected to protect them. And you already know what I consider to be the best way to protect someone is. Then he crossed his arms. Plus, they're your friends. Sasuke nodded, satisfied with his cousin's response. You've already seen what I can do with taijutsu, Sasuke said. So, I guess there's no point in explaining that. Not unless there's something else you've been working on, Shisui said. Now list the ninjutsu you know and then show how well you can perform them. Sasuke nodded and went into detail about the jutsu he knew. Which included the Academy 3 and several Kanton jutsu, such as the Great Fireball and Phoenix Bullet. Shisui then had him demonstrate to them. Thankfully, the area was treated with a special substance that made it resistant to elemental attacks, so Sasuke didn't have to worry about starting a forest fire. Not bad, Shisui said at the end of it. Is there anything else you want to show me? Sasuke bit his lip, wondering if he should tell him. There is one more jutsu I'm working on, he said. Shisui gestured for him to go on. Sasuke took a deep breath and went through the hand signs he had been practicing. Then he channeled his chakra into the palm of his hands. Raiton, lighting palms, blue lighting formed and cracked around Sasuke's hands. Then without another word, he shot his hand out at a nearby tree. He grabbed the tree trunk and channeled the electricity into the bark. A moment later, a section of the tree exploded into a shower of wood. Sasuke pulled his hand back and opened his palm, showing the smoking remains of wood fragments. Sasuke turned around to face Shisui to see he had an impressed look on his face. So that's the Raiton jutsu you were talking about, he said. Sasuke nodded. My brother showed it to me once he learned I had an affinity for Raiton, he explained. I'm hoping to learn more to even out my Katon jutsu. Shisui nodded. Most Uchiha are known for their Katon jutsu, he said. Encountering one with an affinity for Raiton will certainly come as a surprise. That was what I was thinking, Sasuke said. I don't know how helpfully I'll in teaching you Raiton, Shisui admitted. I don't know that many Raiton jutsu. But I do know somebody who can help. Sasuke nodded, glad for that. Itachi had told him that affinity for Raiton was rare, as Konoha was known more for its Katon users. They were in the land of fire, after all. Shisui had a thoughtful expression on his face. From what I can see, you're pretty heavily set on the offensive, he said. You have a decent set of Katon jutsu, and you are working on your Raiton affinity. Your grasp on the Uchiha Taijutsu style is coming along nicely, but it could still use some work. The way I see it, you're going to be the sword of the team. The one who is always focused on attacking the enemy while your teammates act to support you. However, I would like to teach you some defensive techniques to round out your skill set. Sasuke nodded. He understood what his sensei was saying. There's something else I'm working on. But Naruto and Hinata don't know about this one. I wanted to surprise them. Shisui looked at him, intrigued. What? I'm practicing kenjutsu, Sasuke said. After Shisui was done with Sasuke, Hinata was the next to be called on. While she was gone, Naruto would still work on his chakra control, while Sasuke was expected to work on his taijutsu form. Entering a small clearing, Hinata looked around, noting the scorch marks around the area. Sasuke must have demonstrated his katan jutsu. All right, Hinata, Shisui-sensei said, facing her. Show me what you can do. Hinata nodded her head. I don't know that many ninjutsu, she explained. Just the Academy 3, some Suiton, and a Doton jutsu. Shisui nodded. Understandable, he said. The Hyuga aren't known for their ninjutsu mastery. A shame, really, with their Byakugan, many Hyuga could make for great ninjutsu specialists. Hinata nodded. A few do branch out, she commented. Like you, Shisui replied. As far as I'm concerned, that makes you better than most shinobi I know. Too many rely on a single skill set, so they fall apart the moment they're countered. Hinata hadn't really thought of that. She only did it because she felt she wasn't as good at taijutsu. So, she looked into other fields of study to find what she was good at. Show me what you do know, Shisui said. Then you can show me the clan techniques you know. At this, Hinata gave him a wary look. Don't worry, you can only show me the ones your clan will let you. The rest I'll leave up to Hyuga to judge. Hinata nodded and went through all of the ninjutsu she knew. First, showing the Academy 3, then the elemental jutsu she knew. After that, she shows the clan techniques she knew, and was allowed to reveal, such as the 16 palm. Shisui looked impressed. Not bad, he said. I've seen some Hyuga in action before, and I see you have the potential to be one of their best. Hinata blushed at the compliment. Thank you, Shisui-sensei. She was not sure how right he was, though. So, we got your ninjutsu down, and you've shown me the clan techniques you could, Shisui said. The Academy reports said you're working on Iryo ninjutsu. Is that right? Hinata nodded her head. I only know the mystic palm right now, she explained. That's all right, Shisui said. I know the medical field can be difficult to get into. He took a kunai out and cut the palm of his hand. Show me how well you can do. Hinata quickly took Shisui's hand and used the mystic palm to close the wound. Then she wiped the blood off his hand. Please don't cut yourself like that again, she said after she was done. Shisui smiled and pulled his hand back. Don't worry, I won't, he said. Aside from the mystic palm, have you been practicing any other medical techniques? Hinata nodded. I finished all the basic skills 2 months ago, she said. But I couldn't start on the mid-level techniques until, she trailed off. Until you were a genin, Shisui finished for her. I'm guessing you'll need the endorsement of your Jonin sensei to go further down medical training. Hinata nodded. And another doctor, she explained. I already have Tsunade-sama to support me. I just need you to fill out a form. I will, Shisui said. It would be fantastic to have an actual medic on our team. I know basic aid, and so do Sasuke and Naruto. But I would feel better knowing we have someone who knows what they're doing. Hinata blushed again, happy for the praise. I've also been making my own medicine, she said. An eager glint appeared in Shisui's eyes. Even better, he said. I assume this is because a certain someone gets hurt a lot. Hinata's silence was all the answer he needed. Since we're on the subject of making our own stuff, have you looked into making your own poisons? Hinata stiffened. That had been something she had thought about and was still uncertain about. A little, she said slowly. Shisui noticed her discomfort. You don't have to if you don't feel comfortable with it, he said. He got a nod from Hinata, who relieved by his words. It was still something she would have to think about later, but at least for now, it wasn't something she had to worry about. Is there something else you want to tell me? Hinata remained silent for a moment, wondering if she should tell him what she was working on. I am working on something, she said. Then went into an explanation of what she had in mind. Naruto was a little disappointed that he was the last to be called on by their sensei. But he wasn't surprised either. Looking around the clearing with his eyes, he saw that the area had scorch marks and dump areas. His teammates must have shown the jutsu they knew. He heard Shisui clear his throat, grabbing his attention. Naruto turned his head to face Shisui. "You know, it's a little creepy how you look around like that," he commented. "You still turned your head around as though you still have eyes in your sockets." "Why?" "Unconscious habit, I guess," Naruto said. "Or maybe it's just something hardwired in the human brain." Shisui shrugged, accepting the answer for what it was. "Well, you should already know the drill by now," he said. Naruto nodded and went into an explanation of the jutsu he knew, even showing how well he knew them. He started with the Academy 3, except for the standard Bunshin, for obvious reasons, then the element jutsus he knew, like the Great Breakthrough, Wind Cutter, and Water Whip. Shisui looked impressed by the display. "Nice," he said. "Though I think you might have put too much in some of them." He looked over at a tree that was almost falling over. Its roots were visibly holding it in place. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. "Sorry," he said. "Still have a hard time with my chakra control." "I understand," Shisui said. "I know you have a lot of chakra, quite a bit more than most kids your age do. We'll try to work on your control some more. Now then, you have yet to show me your Kagebunshin." Naruto nodded. "I was hoping to save that one for last," he said. "What do you want me to do?" "Make as many clones as you can," Shisui said. "Don't bother with control, just pop out as many of those things as you can. I want to see what I'm working with." Naruto nodded and made the hand sign for the Kagebunshin. He channeled all his chakra and released it. Kagebushin no Jutsu, from Naruto's perspective, he saw the whole clearing and a large part of the forest area enveloped in smoke. Once the smoke cleared, all that could be seen was an ocean of blondes. Very handsome blondes, might he add. With the smoke gone now, Shisui was able to look around. If he had been impressed before, now he was awestruck. "Just how many clones did you make?" Shisui asked, looking all over the filled clearing. Naruto shrugged. "I'm not sure," he said honestly. "We could count them if you like." Shisui shook his head. "No, never mind," he said. "Let's just say it's a lot. Disperse them, but carefully and slowly." Naruto nodded. "I know," he said. He dispersed the clones in clusters, letting a few seconds to pass between each cluster. He ignored all the useless information being dumped into his mind. Maybe 10 minutes later, Naruto and Shisui were alone again. Shisui gave Naruto a concerned look. "You okay, Naruto?" he asked. "No headaches or anything?" Naruto nodded his head. "Don't worry, the clones were only around for a few seconds, and they all had the same memories. So, it really wasn't that much of an overload." "So, you know about the memory thing," Shisui stated. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, Kurama told me about it after I learned the Kagebunshin," he explained. "Kurama?" Shisui asked. "You would know him as the Kyubi," Naruto said. Shisui's eyes widened. "I knew you were in contact with the fox," Shisui said carefully. "But I didn't know you knew its name. Or even that it had a name." Naruto ignored the low growl in the back of his head. "He's not as bad as you think," Naruto defended Kurama. "And the Hokage does know about this. You can ask him yourself." Shisui nodded. "I will," he said. "That brings me to my next question. Can you access it?" Naruto corrected sharply. "His chakra?" Shisui finished his question. Naruto nodded. "I can," he said. "I've practicing ever since I meet Kurama." "Which would have been about 7 years ago," Shisui said. "From what I understand, Jinchuriki can measure their power based on the number of tails they can manifest. Right?" He got a nod from Naruto. "So, how many tails are you up to?" right now? Naruto asked, getting a nod from his sensei. None, Shisui raised an eyebrow. You've been working on this for 7 years, and you can't even manifest any tails? He asked. Naruto laughed nervously and scratched the back of his head. Well, that's because Kurama believes I'm not ready yet, he explained. The furball has really high standards when it comes to controlling his chakra, and he won't let me control any tails until I can fully control it at each stage. As I am now, he'll only let me create a tailless cloak. Still powerful, but nothing compared to what the tails will offer me. Shisui hummed thoughtfully. I suppose I can't blame him, he said. I read about what happens when a Jinchuriki draws too much power and goes berserk. Considering the Kyuubi is the strongest of the 9, I don't want to see what would happen if you couldn't control yourself. Naruto nodded. Kurama had told him what could happen if he went out of control. The kind of damage he could do in that state. It was the main reason he didn't complain too much about Kurama's high standards of control. So, how close are you to your first tail? Shisui asked. That is in the opinion of your tenant. Not that far, actually, Naruto replied. In about 3 or 4 months. After that, he said the other tails should follow more quickly. The first tail is always the hardest. Shisui nodded. And how long until you can manifest all 9 tails? A few years, Naruto said. Probably when I'm about 16 or 17. 18 at the latest. Well, that's good to know, Shisui said. Having a Jinchuriki on the team will be helpful. Especially when we get into a tight spot. Naruto nodded, seeing what his sensei meant. I don't want to rely too much on Kurama's power, Naruto said. I want to be able to rely on my own power and abilities. That way, if something happens and I can't call on his chakra, I'll have something to fall on. Shisui smiled at him. I wasn't saying you should rely on his power, he said. That way, I see it. It's just another tool in your arsenal. Like my Sharingan, it's nice to have to, but it is only as good as I allow it to be. That alone makes him better than most Uchiha I have met, Kurama said. There is one last thing I want to ask before we move on, Shisui said. What about your teammates? Do they know about your status as a Jinchuriki and what it means? Naruto smiled and nodded. Of course they do, he said. And all my other friends know about it too. Shisui gave him a surprised look. Really? He asked and got a nod from Naruto. Hinata and Sasuke I can see. They're your closest friends and now your teammates. But for the others, I didn't know you trusted them that well. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I took a chance, he said. They still think of me as me, and that's what matters to me. Shisui nodded. That's good to hear, he said. It makes things easier anyway. That way, we don't have to tiptoe around the subject when they're around. Shisui placed a hand on his chin as he thought over something. So, is there anything else you're working on? Well, I am working on Fuinjutsu, Naruto said. Shisui looked over his genin as they gathered together. He had to admit he was impressed with them. Sure, he knew they were good and that this team would be awesome all on its own. He just never knew how good these kids would be. Shisui smiled. He was so going to brag about them with the other jonin. Alright, you're 3, you've actually impressed me, he admitted to his students. He saw all 3 of them perk up and smile at him. I knew the 3 of you were good. But this is something else. That's because we're the best, Naruto bragged. Next to him, Sasuke nodded and had a smirk on his lips. Hinata just nodded and had light blush spreading around her cheeks. Now, don't get too cocky, Shisui said. You're still genin and far from being on top in the shinobi world. The 3 genin deflated as they were reminded where they stood in the world. But you are good, nonetheless. I have an idea of where each of you stands and where you can improve. At least as individuals, tomorrow I want to see what you can do as a team. He already had an idea about that. The genin test from the other day gave him an idea, but tomorrow would give him a clearer picture. But as it stands, I already have a rough schedule for our training, he explained. From Monday to Friday, we will be meeting here at Training Ground 11 at 5 in the morning, so adjust your schedules accordingly. He got nods from his genin. We'll begin our days with simple warm-up exercises for 1 hour. Then, we'll conduct teamwork exercises for 2 hours. After that, we'll run different drills and scenarios for 2 hours. Then, we'll go into individual training. Each day I'll take one of you for personal instruction while the other two work on whatever you want or anything I think you might need to work on. Mondays, I'll work with Sasuke, Tuesdays will be with Naruto, and Wednesdays, I will go to Hinata. Thursdays will be with whoever I think needs it the most. Fridays will instead be replaced with an additional hour of teamwork exercises. Understood? His genin nodded. We understand, Hinata said. Good, Shisui said. After the individual training, we'll take a 30-minute launch break. Then we'll move to sparring matches for an hour and a half. Afterward, we'll head for the Hokage Tower and take missions for the next 2 hours. At this, he saw some excited gleams in the eyes of the three genin. Now, don't get too excited. Since you are fresh genin, we'll take drinks, nothing exciting, I'm sorry to say. That was perhaps the only downside to being a Jonin sensei. He would be expected to watch over his students for drinks. Chores and minimal work were not his ideal shinobi missions. But hey, at least he'll see the looks on their faces when they realize what drinks are. That would make it worth it. Almost. Shisui was already planning to move past the drinks as quickly as possible. Anyway, after the missions, we'll return here and briefly discuss the say. Then I'll dismiss the team. Now. Then, any questions? What about weekends? Sasuke asked. What do we do on those days? Glade, you asked, Shisui said. Weekends are yours to enjoy. But I will tell you this, I don't care what you do on Saturdays. You can train more, take missions, or even do nothing. But Sundays, I want you guys to rest. Your bodies need time to recuperate, is that understood? He eyed both Naruto and Sasuke. Both boys nodded at him. Hi, they said in unison. Hinata also nodded. I'll make sure Naruto doesn't do anything that day, she said. Then I'll worry about Sasuke, Shisui said. All right, kids. That's it for the day. I know it was short, but I wanted to get an idea of what you can do on your own. Which I am happy to say is good. The three of you impressed me today, and I look forward to seeing what the three of you can do together tomorrow. But if today is any indication, then I know this will be the best team our village will have to offer. Who knows, maybe we'll be more famous than the Sannin, call him biased, but he did see a lot of potential in his team. He knew their names would be long remembered. He saw happy expressions on the faces of his students. Trust me, we will, Naruto said with a fox-like grin. We'll be the best team that this village has ever seen. It has to be, considering I'll be Hokage one day. His boast earned him a good-natured snort from Sasuke and a supportive stare from Hinata. We've heard that one before, Sasuke commented. Only because it's true, Naruto said. Wait and see, Sasuke. When I take the hat, you and everyone else will bow to me. I look forward to the day, Sasuke replied. Shisui smiled at his genin as the boys descended into one of their arguments. The ones he knew frequently led them to spar with each other. Before that could happen, Hinata spoke up. Shisui-sensei, all eyes turned to her as she got out her question. The other day, you said that each team had a purpose for being made, right? The boys looked at Shisui. I remember now, Naruto said. I was talking to Sarah about it, and she mentioned something about a team fulfilling certain roles. Shursui nodded, glad his genin remembered what he said. I did, he confirmed. You see, when making teams, we take more than just how well each person works together into consideration. We also consider what sorts of missions they'll be taking. You see, Konoha likes to specialize its teams towards specific kinds of missions or in certain aspects of shinobi skills. Like there is this one team that specializes in close-quarters combat, they have 2 taijutsu specialists and a weapons specialist. Or how the teams in your class were organized. Like what? Sasuke asked. Like, take your friends, for example, Shursui replied. There's Ino, Choji, and Shikamaru. Their team is geared towards capture and interrogation missions. Choji is the muscle of the group and can hold the enemy down long enough for Shikamaru to ensnare them in one of his shadow jutsu. Then Ino can go into their mind and extract information from them. He got nods from the 3 showing they understood. Then there are Kiba, Shino, and Sakura. What do you think they're suited for? Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke looked at each other, holding a silent conversation. It seemed they didn't have a clue about that, or at least the boys didn't. Could they be a tracker team? Hinata asked. Shursui smiled as the boys looked back at him. Right in one, he said. Their team is geared towards hunting down a target and bringing them back, ideally alive. Kiba and Shino provide the tracker roles while at the same time being the team's combat specialists. Kiba being the close-range fighter, and Shino fighting at a distance with his Kiku. But what about Sakura? Naruto asked. I don't remember her having any tracking ability. True, Shursui said. But take into consideration who her sensei is. Kurenai, our village's resident genjutsu specialist. A very useful talent when you want to track someone down and bring them back. Now he was seeing the gears working in the minds of his genin. Sakura did have the best chakra control in our class, Sasuke said. She would be perfect for genjutsu training. And medical jutsu, Hinata added. She would be the team's medic. She could even treat captured targets if they need it. Right, to both of you, Shursui said. Her academy reports also indicate that she has a highly analytical mind. With the proper training, she put that mind toward more conventional means of tracking. You can see where each genin's skills and abilities are taken into consideration. So that leaves the question, Sasuke said. What is our team made for? Glade, you asked, Shursui said. There is no official term for what I have in mind for this team. But if I had to describe it, I would say we are a deep strike team. Deep strike team? Hinata repeated nervously. What is that? In theory, we'll be taking missions that will take us behind enemy lines, Shursui said. From there, our objectives could range from destroying vital supply lines to assassinating high-profile targets. We may even be expected to extract persons of interest from the enemy, such as important prisoners, or take important officials as prisoners. During times of war, we would essentially be wreaking havoc on the enemy from behind their lines. His genin showed him a mixed range of reactions. Coming from excited and awe to hesitant and fearful. That hat sounds kind of like what the ANBU do, Sasuke said. At least it sounds like some of the stuff my brother told me about his time with them. Shursui nodded. It does fall along their lines, he said. In fact, there is a good chance we'll be working with the ANBU frequently. But don't worry about that. We won't be taking missions like that for a while. Just know that my training will have you geared towards that. His genin nodded, seemingly relieved. Shursui, Naruto said. A lot of these missions sound like something we would do in wartime. But we're at peace, right? Shursui carefully held back the tug at his lips. True, he said. We are at peace. But peace in the elemental nations is not as it appears. The nations are closer to war than they would like people to think. Iwa is still nursing a grudge from the previous war, Kumo barely maintains the illusion of peace with us, and Kiri, Shursui crossed his arms as a frown formed on his face. Well, we all know what is going on there. Suna is our only real friendly neighbor of the 5, and even then, we have to be careful with them. Not to mention all the little things going on across the continent. Things might look peaceful now, but a lot is bubbling underneath, and the sparks of war could ignite at any moment. Each of his students shifted around uncomfortably. This was something they didn't like to hear, and to be truthful, Shursui couldn't blame them. It was a sentiment he shared, but he knew this was something they had to know, considering the line of work they would be going into. A small smile spread across his face. It wouldn't hurt to offer some words of comfort. Try not to worry too much about it, he said. It's been like this for a long time. No one is ready to go to war, so I doubt anything will be happening soon. The 3 genin relaxed a little. We will be doing some of this stuff I mentioned to prevent war from happening. Or, at the very least, delay it long enough for Konoha to prepare. He would have to talk to them about some of the other realities of shinobi life later. But for now, he would let them leave with some hope in their eyes today. Okay, he said after a moment. So now that you 3 know what kind of team you will be, do you have any other questions? Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke looked between each other and him. Not that I can think of, Naruto said for them. Shursui shrugged. I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions for later, he said. But if that is everything, the team is dismissed. Remember to meet up here tomorrow at the same time as today. Tomorrow, I want to see what you can do as a team. So, bring your A-game. Hi Shursui-sensei, all 3 genin chorused. Then one by one, they left. Now left alone, Shursui crossed his arms and smiled. His genin are an impressive lot. He knew they would be. They're good kids, and he knew they would turn out to be great shinobi one day. All he had to do was train them right and try to be a good sensei to them. Shursui let a nervous chuckle and rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't realize how nerve-wracking this could be, he said to himself. The reality was now dawning on him. This was his first genin team, his first team as a sensei. He had so much to teach them and so much to learn about being a good sensei. For a moment, the young Uchiha man wondered if he was up to the job, if maybe there were others more qualified to lead this team. Shursui pressed these thoughts to the back of his mind. There was no use dwelling on those thoughts. All he could do was press forward and find out. But he did resolve to be the best sensei he could be. He had to, for their sake and for the sake of the village. Shursui looked up at the sky and smiled. Well, time to make my report, he said. Then he would hit up the Jonin bar. He had some students to brag about. Konoha. It did not take long for the newly created Team 11 to settle into a routine. From Monday to Friday, they would get up before the sun rose and meet up at their designated training ground at 5 to begin their training. They would follow the same schedule their sensei Shursui outlined on their first day as a genin team. As Shursui promised, they were not working on anything serious right now. They were going over stuff they already knew more than anything. Shursui wanted the skills they already had to be as sharp as possible before he moved them onto anything new. Not to say they didn't learn anything new. Shursui had them working on the water walking technique and had given each of his students a new jutsu to work on. Moreover, now that they were newly minted genin, the trio of Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke were given greater access to the shinobi achieves to study. At home, they were given more training by their clans. Or host clan in the case of Naruto. So, they were able to work on new skills or expand on the ones they already had. It was hard work all around. They were being pushed on the training grounds, and they were being pushed at home. Already though they were seeing results. They were getting stronger and faster, and their skills were sharper. The results were small, but the three of them knew they would get bigger over time. Overall, Team 11 was doing well and going about their ordinary lives. Once their training was done for the day, the genin and their jonin sensei would go to the Hokage Tower to take missions. Which brings us to where we are now. This is, Thousand Eye, a male voice said. I have eyes on the target. Copy that, Moon Eye said. I have them too. Red Eye here, another male said. Moving to your position. Thousand Eye nodded his head and looked back at the target. They had them in their sights and were slowly cutting off all points of escape. They had been pursuing their quarry for some time. The creature proved to be a slippery thing and not to mention very vicious. Poor Red Eye, Thousand Eye didn't think the scars would ever heal. This is Master Eye, their leader said. Once you have the target boxed in, you have permission to capture them. Remember, our client wants the prisoner alive. Easy for her to say, Red Eye said. That thing almost took my eye out. I say kill the thing and be done with it. Thousand Eyes snickered to himself. Don't be so melodramatic, he said. It's just an eye. A low growl could be heard from Red Eye. That's easy for you to say, dope, Red Eye said. You have like 1,000 of those things. I only have. The two. Some giggling could be heard on Moon Eye's end. All right, you too, Master Eye said. Enough of the bickering. We have a mission to complete. Hi, the other three said in unison. I'm in position, Red Eye said. Target sighted. Is everyone ready? Master Eye asked. Thousand Eye ready. Moon Eye ready. Red Eye ready. Then the mission is a go, Master Eye said. Capture the target. At once, three figures leaped out from their hiding places and descended on their unsuspecting target. Meow. Moments later, and after a brief struggle, Team 11's target was captured and secured. Or as secure as one could get with Tora, the Hell Cat. The little ball of fur and furry struggle against Sasuke's grip. Hold still, you little rat, he said, trying to ignore the scratches he was getting from the thing. Just hold her a little longer, Naruto said. We need to confirm if this is our target. What is there to confirm? Sasuke asked. Trust me, this cat is very recognizable. The three genin heard some chuckling and looked over to see their sensei walking up to them. Well, we still have to follow procedure, Shisui said. So, Naruto, is this our cat? Naruto nodded. It is, he said. I can confirm this is Tora, he smiled as the cat continued to bite and claw at Sasuke. I'm telling you, this is no normal cat, Sasuke said through gritted teeth. Are we sure it's not some demon? Maybe we should try asking your friend, he looked at Naruto. In his head, Naruto heard a low growl. Kit, Kurama said. Would you please remind the Uchiha brat that there is a difference between a demon and a Biju? Naruto shook his head and smiled. Kurama says hi, he said, getting an eye roll from Sasuke. Time to get Tora back to her owner, Shisui said. He looked over at Hinata. Hinata, would you mind holding Tora? She seems to like you best. Hinata nodded and walked up to Sasuke. She held her arms out. Come on, Tora, she said. Come to Hinata. Tora stopped her struggle in Sasuke's arms and looked between her and Sasuke. Then Tora did what looked like the cat equivalent of a shrug. She leaped out from Sasuke's arms and landed in Hinata's, purring. Sasuke rubbed his scratched-up arms. Stupid bipolar demon cat, he muttered. With a laugh, Team 11 was off. Hokage Tower, Team 11 reporting a successful mission, Shisui said. We have captured the fire daimyo's wife's runaway cat, Tora. The Hokage nodded and smiled at them. Congratulations, he said. He motioned for one of the shinobi in the room. The man nodded and left the room. Our client will be here to collect her bounty. Almost on cue, the door was busted open and a shadow swept across the room. Before anyone could react, the shadow was upon Hinata. My precious Tora. In an instant, Tora was snatched out of Hinata's arms. She was now in the arms of the fire daimyo's wife's arms, and the life was being squeezed out of the poor thing. Naruto and Hinata looked at the victimized cat with sympathetic expressions. No wonder she runs away, was the shared thought between them. Though Sasuke seemed to think differently. He had a rather vindictive smile on his face. The woman turned over to the genin as she held tightly to her cat. "Thank you so much," she said. "You reunited me with my precious Tora." She hugged that cat tightly. Naruto winced as he could have sworn he saw the cat's eyes bulge out. "I don't think I can ever thank you enough." Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Sure, no problem," he said. He had no idea how to respond to this woman. Or even how to tell her she was the reason why her cat kept running away. Hinata was pushing her fingers together at a similar loss for words. "Just make sure she doesn't get away again," Sasuke said with a smile. "And give her all the love you can." He looked directly at Tora. Tora, in response, gave him one of the most hate-filled stares Naruto had ever seen. "Of course, I will," the daimyo's wife said, squeezing the life out of Tora. She then turned to face the Hokage and placed a large sum of money on the table. "As always Hiruzen-san, I am impressed with your forces." Then she left the room. Naruto turned his head to face the Hokage. "What is she even doing here?" he asked. "Shouldn't she be back at the capital with the fire daimyo? You know how the daimyo likes to have frequent checks on our village?" The Hokage asked, getting nods from the genin. "She likes to be a part of those inspections. Despite her appearance, she's actually good at it." Naruto nodded. He knew that appearances could be deceiving. "She could try treating her cat better," he commented. The Hokage nodded. "And loss out on one of our best-paying clients?" he said. "Speaking of," he went through some papers. "Since there is enough time, how about one last mission? Let's see, there's a client who wants a babysitter for their child. A landlord who wants one of his properties to be inspected. Or how about this request from the Inuzuka, they want their kennels cleaned out again." The three genin in the room winced. These dranks, or chorus as Naruto thought of them, were starting to get to them. Naruto got they were new shinobi and wouldn't be given the good missions for a while. But this? Doing chores that others could be doing themselves. Naruto was about to voice his opinions. Sasuke looked like he was close behind him. "Actually Hokage-sama," Shisui said, stopping them. "I think my team is ready for their first crank." The Hokage looked at Shisui in surprise. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It's only been a month since Team 11 was formed. It might be wiser to give them another month or two." Shisui looked over his genin. They gave him controlled but enthusiastic nods. He smiled and looked back at the Hokage. "Positive," he said. "I know they're ready." The Chunin next to Hokage seemed to have a different opinion. "Hokage-sama," Irika said. "Are you sure you want to listen to him? Team 11 only graduated from the academy a couple of months ago." The Hokage smoked on his pipe with a smile on his face. "I understand your concerns Irika-san," he said. "But if their Jonin Sensei says they're ready, I'm willing to trust him. Have a little more faith in your former students." "Yeah, Irika-sensei," Naruto said. "Have a little more faith in us. We can do this." Irika smiled at the blonde-haired boy. "I know that," he said. It's only been a few months. I still think of you and the others as my students. Thinking that you will be leaving the village soon kind of scares me." "Hey, don't sweat it," Shisui said. "Even I'm a little nervous for my genin." "Hey," Naruto said. Didn't you just say you had full confidence in us? Shursui smiled at his charge. I do, he said. But that doesn't stop me from worrying. But I can't keep the three of you in the village forever. At some point, you have to go out so you can grow. Then he looked over at Irika. Don't worry about them, Irika-san. They're good kids. You did a good job teaching them. I promise to watch after them. Irika smiled at the Uchiha man. All right then, he said. Then I'll wish the best of luck on your first crank. Hokage-sama? The Hokage nodded and started to look through a pile of papers marked as crank. Let's see now, he said. What can we give you? Border patrol along the border with Lightning Country? No. Escorting merchants out of the country? Maybe. Ah, here we are, he pulled out a paper from the pile. I think this one will do. Shursui walked up and took the paper. According to this, the mission comes in 2 parts, he said after looking over the paper. First, we're to pick up a scroll here in the village and take it to the capital. After we drop off the scroll with our contact, we will escort someone back to Konoha. Who do we give the scroll to? Naruto asked. And who is it we're escorting to the village? And how long should we pack for? Sasuke asked. Shursui smiled. See, I told you they were ready, he said to the Hokage and Irika. We'll drop the scroll off at the daimyo's palace. Naruto perked up. Does that mean we'll get to meet the daimyo? Shursui shook his head. No, we're only giving the scroll to one of his people. We'll probably only get to enter the reception area of the palace. After that, we'll be escorting a member of Konoha Civilian Council back to Konoha. At the mention of the Civilian Council, Naruto winced. What's a member of the Civilian Council doing in the capital? Sasuke asked. Turns out he had some business there, Shursui said. By the time we get up to the capital and drop off the scroll, his business should be concluded. Naruto nodded slowly. All right, he said. Shursui could understand his student's wariness. He knew that the Civilian Council did not like the blindfolded boy. Do we have to leave the capital right away? A good question to ask, Shursui thought. He looked back at the scroll to see if there was a deadline on the mission or if there was any indication the council member would be in a hurry to return to Konoha. The mission details don't say, he said, then put the paper away. Hokage-sama, would it be possible for us to stay in the capital for a day or 2? I think my genin would enjoy the opportunity to explore a new place out of Konoha. Behind him, he could feel the excitement rolling off his genin. The Hokage chuckled and took a smoke from his pipe. If the council member is willing to let you, he said. Then, by all means, enjoy a brief stay at the capital. I highly recommend the hot springs. Shursui nodded. He was already thinking of ways to persuade the council member to let them stay in the capital. Then, as the Jonin Sisai of Team 11, I accept this mission, he said, bowing to the Hokage. You are expected to leave tomorrow, the Hokage said. I wish you the best of luck. Dismissed. Hi. Shursui and his team said. Then they left the mission room. It did not take long for Naruto to start acting like an excited child. All right, he shouted, pumping his fist into the air. Our first crank mission. Isn't that great, Hinata? We're going on our first real shinobi mission. Hinata giggled. I think it will be fun, she said. I hope we're ready for it. Of course, we are, Naruto said. We're the best team in the whole village. We'll knock this mission out of the park. Sasuke snorted. While I won't dispute the first part, he said. Aren't you getting a little overexcited about this? We're just taking a scroll up to the capital and then escorting some crusty old man back to the village. Naruto rolled a pair of his eyes and crossed his arms. Not like you're excited about this, too, Naruto pointed out. Or would rather be doing more drinks. It's not too late to go back and ask. Shursui laughed a little when he saw his cousin stiffen and try to act cool. Now, I wouldn't be so quick to act, he said. Shursui-sensei thinks we're ready. Don't you? Shursui smiled as his genin looked up at him. Of course, I do, he responded. I wouldn't have requested a crank if I didn't. Sasuke looked away and put his hands in his pockets. Then I guess we'll have to take it, he said. Shursui rolled his eyes and whispered to his other two charges. Don't mind him. He's just as excited as you guys are. Naruto and Hinata nodded. So, how long will this mission take? Sasuke asked. How should we pack? Shursui ran the calculations in his head. If it were just him, getting to the capital would take a couple of days. It would take longer to get back since he would be expected to escort a civilian. However, he had a genin team with him now, so he had to adjust his estimates. I figure it would take us about 4 days to get to the capital, he said. Then, since we'll take a civilian back, we'll take 6 days. So altogether, 10 days, 11 or 12 if we can stay in the capital. So we should pack for 2 weeks. Naruto said. I'd make it 3, Sasuke added. You never know what will happen. Shursui nodded, happy his genin were thinking ahead. Very good guys, he said. We'll meet up at the village gates tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I suggest you get some extra rest in. You'll need it. His genin nodded. Shursui-sensei? Naruto spoke up. Yes, Naruto? Shursui said. What about our training? Naruto asked. Will we have to put that on hold? Shursui shook his head. We'll still do our training, he said. We'll just have to adjust our schedule a bit. That said, we won't be doing as much since we'll need the energy for the mission. His genin nodded. Before any more could be said, a new voice entered the conversation. Well, what do we have here? Shursui looked to the source to see that Team 10 and their Jonin Sensei were approaching them. Going out on another mission? Asuma asked. Asuma-san, Shursui greeted the bearded man. His genin started to chat with their friends. It's good to see you. And as a matter of fact, we are. Asuma smiled. Let me guess, he said. Cleaning the Inazuka kennels, or maybe painting some fences. Oh, how about trying to catch Tora again? I heard that cat was on the loose again. At the mention of the hell cat, the genin shuddered. Shursui shook his head. Actually, we already did that one, he said. He held back a laugh when he saw the genin of Team 10 relax. And we're not doing any of the others either. I requested for a crank. Asuma's eyes widened. Are you sure they're ready for something like that? He asked. It's only been a month since the teams passed. I think they're ready, Shursui said. We can't keep them in the village forever. Asuma rubbed his chin. I suppose you're right, he said. Then before he could say anything else, Ino made her voice known. What? The girl shouted at her sensei. What's this I hear about them getting a crank? Why do they get to go on a crank while we're still stuck doing meaningless chores? I demand that you get us a crank. Now look what you've done, Asuma grumbled. She'll be pestering me all day about this. Shursui chuckled. I think you can manage her, he said. Be seeing you later. He and his genin left Asuma and the rest of Team 10. Alright, team, Shursui said as they stepped out of the Hokage tower. We won't bother going back to the training ground. So, I'll dismiss you here. Remember to meet up at the front gates tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Understood? Hi, Shursui-sensei. Hyuga compound Naruto was smiling from ear to ear as the food was being served. He was eating with Hinata's family, a common occurrence since he was taken in by the clan. With him was also Sarah, who insisted that she didn't need to be here since technically she wasn't Naruto's caretaker anymore. Hitomi wouldn't hear any of it. Someone seems excited, Hinata's mom said. Care to tell us what's got you so excited? If it's one of your pranks, please give us some forewarning before it happens. Sarah said. Now, why would you say that? Hitomi said with a smile. So, we can get some distance, Sarah said. Or at least get our story straight. Hinata giggled while Naruto huffed. It's nothing like that, he said. Besides, I haven't managed to pull anything big since Team 11 became official. Shursui-sensei has been keeping us busy. So, what is it then? Hinata's father asked. We got our first crank, Naruto said. This got surprised looks from the three adults at the table. Your first crank? Hinata's mom asked. And so soon? Naruto nodded. Yeah, Shursui-sensei asked for one after we caught that stupid cat, he explained. Tora? Sarah said with a shudder. Naruto looked at her with surprise. You know about that hell cat? He got a quick nod from her. Then he looked back at the others and explained the details of the mission. I see, Hinata's dad said, rubbing his chin. Reminds me of the time my team got their first crank. Come to think of it, we got ours fairly early in our time as a team. You did? Naruto inquired. Hinata nodded her head, showing she was interested in the story. Hinata's dad nodded. I believe it was about 2 or 3 months, he said. Normally, a newly formed genin team takes about 4 or 5 months to take their first crank mission. So, what was yours like, father? Hinata asked. And what about your mother? Ours was a bit more involved than yours, Hinata's dad said with a grim expression. We got a bandit elimination mission. We got our first kills in that mission. The atmosphere in the room became more subdued at the mention of that. I'm sorry, Naruto said sheepishly. I didn't mean to bring up bad memories. No, it's all right, Hinata's dad said, shaking his head. Standards back then were a little different than they are now. With any luck, you three won't have to worry about that on this mission. By comparison, Hinata's mother started. My team's first crank was tamed. We had border patrol along Wind Country. It was an uneventful mission, but I remember how excited my team was. It was also our first time leaving the confines of Konoha. Hinata's dad nodded. The same thing for us, he said. A crank is usually the first time that a genin leaves the village. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I think it will be fun, he said. Going somewhere that isn't Konoha. Meeting new people and getting to know them, then he turned his head to face Sarah. So, Sarah, what was your first crank like? Sarah shrugged. I was something like yours, Naruto, she said. A courier mission. Though not to the capital. We had to collect a scroll from one of our outposts near Lighting Country's border. Then bring it back to Konoha. I think it might have been their monthly reports. Did you meet any Kyunanin? Hinata asked nervously. Sarah shook her head. Thankfully, no, she replied. Though I do remember the mix of excitement and uneasy at the thought of encountering some Kyunanin. Even back then, Kumo wanted our eyes, Hinata's dad said bitterly. Sarah nodded. Still, I remember being excited by our first crank, she said. Though I never did show it to my teammates and sensei. But I will admit I am a little envious that you get to go to the capital. Even if it's for a short stay. That's if the council member agrees to let us stay there for a day or two, Naruto said. If not, then I think we'll have to leave the next day. Hinata's mom nodded. Well, here is hoping you get to stay. The capital is simply stunning. So many people and so many buildings. It's like being in a whole other world. Naruto nodded. Yeah, Gigi, I mean the Sandame, he said. Even recommend the hot springs there. Hinata's mom smirked. Why am I not surprised? She commented. There's a couple of restaurants there that you have to try. I'll be sure to give you a listing before you leave. Hinata nodded. That would be nice, she said. We might even get to go shopping if we have the chance. Naruto stiffened. That wasn't something he was looking forward to. Then again, Hinata wasn't nearly as bad as the other girls he knew. So maybe it won't be complete torture for him. He might even be able to bring back some souvenirs. So, I assume you'll be packing for the trip, Sarah said. Naruto nodded. We figure that packing for 2 weeks should be enough, he said. But Shursue-sensei said we should pack for an additional week just in case something comes up. Sarah smiled. Smart man, she said. Which brings me to something important, Hinata's dad said, standing up. I know that this is just a simple crank. But once you are out of Konoha, anything can happen. You won't be afforded the same protections you would have inside our walls. Naruto looked at the man intently. I get that, he said. We won't be as safe outside the village. Hinata's dad nodded. Which is why I have to ask you something. Something that only a father can ask. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What is it? He asked. Look after my daughter, Hayashi said. No matter what happens, you'll keep her safe and make sure she returns home. That you will protect her above all else, even your own life. Father, Hinata said, shocked by her father's statement. Before she could get the rest of her protest out, Naruto stopped her. You won't have to worry about that, Hayashi-san, he said. She's one of my precious people, and I will do everything I can to protect her. Even if it does cost me my life. Hinata looked at him with an unreadable expression. Naruto, she said softly. Naruto saw a smile forming on Hayashi's lips. I would expect nothing less from you, Naruto, he said. But I will also ask you not to sell your life so short. You have people here who care about you, including my daughter. It would break her heart if something happened to you. Naruto smirked. You don't have to worry about that either, Hayashi, he said. I'm not going to die that easily. I still have my dream of becoming Hokage, and I can't do that if I'm dead. He heard a snort coming from Sarah. Knowing you. You would still find a way, she said. Hayashi-san, Naruto said. I would give my life for Hinata, as I would with any of my other precious people. But I won't do that unless there is no other way. So, you don't have to worry about me dying anytime soon. That was when Hinata spoke. He's right, she said, standing, looking more determined than she ever was in her life. I'll protect him too. I'll bring him home safe like he would with me. Because, she hesitated for a moment. Like she was looking for the right words. Because I don't want there to be a world without Naruto. Naruto was struck speechless. He never knew Hinata could say something like that and have so much conviction. Hinata, he said. He felt something in his chest. A warm feeling that seemed to spread across his body, comforting him. The thought of someone else wanting to protect him, valuing his life, felt nice. I never knew she felt like that about me, he thought. That's because she cares about you, Kurama said. Deeply so. What do you mean by that? Naruto asked the fox, confused. He heard a snort coming from the fox. You'll figure it out one day. I see, Hayashi said, closing his eyes. Then I guess I had nothing to worry about. He looked at the two children present at the table. Protect each other. Watch over each other and bring the other home. That is all I can ask of you. Can you do that? Naruto and Hinata looked at each other. At that moment, they had an unspoken conversation, and a promise was made. They would protect each other, no matter what. Then they looked back at the man and nodded. Hayashi smiled. Good then, he said, sitting back down. Then, with that said, I wish you the best of luck on your first crank. Hitomi chuckled. Always the worry word, dear, she said to her husband. Then she looked at the children. Trust each other and protect them. Do that, and I know the two of you will always come home. Her smile spread across her face. You should extend that courtesy to your teammate, Sasuke. Remember, you are part of a team. Trust him and your sensei, have faith that they will protect you as well. Naruto and Hinata nodded, understanding what the woman was conveying to them. We will, Naruto said. Together the three of us and our sensei. We can do anything. Hitomi nodded. Good then, she looked over at Sarah. Anything you would like to add, Sarasan? Sarah shook her head. No, she said. I think you covered everything I would have said. So enjoy your first crank, and I hope that you do get to stay in the capital for a few days. That said, do please try to keep out of trouble. I don't think the collective blood pressures of the elders can handle a letter from the daimyo. I'm not that bad, Naruto pouted as the others laughed. Konoha front gates. The next day the members of Team 11 were gathered together at the front gates of the village. They had packed all the supplies they needed and some extra and had assembled at the front gates about half an hour before the designated time. All three were excited about their crank mission and that they would soon leave the safety of Konoha's wall. None more so than Naruto, he looked out the massive gates with awe and wonder. Seeing a road that seemed to stretch out forever. He had used his eyes to look outside the walls of his village to see what was out there. Forests as far as the eye could, lush and beautiful. It always gave him a sense of excitement that he would one day step outside the village. At 8 o'clock Shisui-sensei walked to them with a smile. All right, Team 11, he said. Today, we have our first crank mission. Are you ready? Hi, was the response from the three genin. Did you pack everything you need for this mission? He asked. Food, water, clothes, and weapons? Naruto nodded. We did, Shisui-sensei, he said. We even packed extra like you said. We're ready to go, his other two teammates nodded. Shisui nodded and smiled. Good, he said. Then, as of right now, our mission begins. Remember, we are to take this scroll, he held out a scroll in his hand. To the capital. Where we will drop it off at the daimyo's palace. Now, it is highly unlikely that we will get to meet the daimyo, but I still expect the three of you to be on your best behavior. Is that understood? Hi, sensei, the genin said in unison. Shisui nodded. Good, he said. Once we drop off the scroll. We are then to meet up with a member of Konoha's civilian council. From there, we'll escort him back to the village. Again, I expect all of you to be on your best behavior. He is a high-ranking official in our village and deserves to be treated with respect. Understood. Naruto swallowed on his breath but nodded his head. Hi, sensei, he said with the others. He saw Hinata and Sasuke exchange worried glances. Shisui's expression softened, and he crossed his arms. Try not to worry too much, he said. While I do want you to treat the council member with respect, I'll be expecting the same from him. If he treats you in any way that is unfitting for a shinobi of our village, let me know, he looked at Naruto. I'll be sure to handle it. Naruto smiled and nodded at his sensei. Thank you, Shisui-sensei, he said. Shisui nodded back at him. Now then, he said, looking over the three of them. Any questions? Naruto looked between his two teammates, seeing if they had anything to ask. He saw they didn't. He looked back at Shisui and shook his head. Shisui nodded. Then follow me, he said, leading them to a stall next to the village gate. It was manned by a pair of chunin. One of them greeted Shisui. Shisui-san, he said. What are you doing here and with a group of genin? Shisui smiled at the man. They're my genin team, he explained. The man quirked an eyebrow. So, the rumors were true, he said. I assume you're here to leave the village for a mission? Shisui nodded. Indeed, he said. It'll be our first crank. The gate guard chuckled and rubbed his chin. I remember my first crank, he said, not quite as exciting as later missions, but you never forget the thrill of leaving the village for the first time. Then he pulled out some papers. Just sign here and tell us how long you should be out. Shisui nodded and signed off on the papers. We should be gone around 2 weeks, he said. 3 at the most. The gate guard and his partner nodded. Then we'll be seeing you. Good luck out there. Shisui gestured to his genin to follow. Just moments later, they were outside the walls of the village. Once outside, Naruto felt a rush of thrill wash over him. Even though he had dozens of pairs of eyes looking around, he couldn't stop his head from looking around, soaking in every detail. Even though there was nothing in his head to soak things in with. Despite all of this, Naruto felt his heart beating faster, and his breath was getting shorter. The forest outside of Konoha, the sounds of birdsong, and even the rush of the wind somehow felt different than they did when he was in the village. He had seen all of this with his eyes many times, wishing he could be out there experiencing it for himself. Now that he was, somehow, it all felt so much more real. In the back of his mind, he also realized he had taken another step on his path as a shinobi. It took him a moment to realize that his teammates and sensei were giving him bemused expressions. Naruto stopped looking around and rubbed the back of his head, feeling his cheeks burning. Sorry, guys, he said. I think I got a little overexcited there. Shisui chuckled and waved him off. Don't worry about it, he said. I've been there before. There's something about leaving the village for the first that stirs the soul. Then he looked at the other 2 members of Team 11. Besides, these 2 were looking around almost as much as you were. In response, Hinata and Sasuke looked away with their faces turning red. Naruto smiled and committed the image to memory. It's nice out here, he said. Shisui smiled at him. Come on, we're wasting time here, he said, walking up in front of the genin. There will be plenty of time to take in the sights as we move. Naruto, do you think you can send some of your eyes forward? Give us some advance warning if something comes up. Naruto nodded. He already had sent several pairs ahead of them in advance. I already did, he said. Nothing so far. Shisui nodded. Good, he said. Once, we're a little way from the village. I want you to send some pairs behind us. Naruto nodded. What about to our sides? He asked. Not bad idea, he said. You won't be stretching yourself out, will you? Naruto shook his head. Trust me, I got plenty, he said, channeling some chirka into the seals along his arms. More eyes appeared in small clouds of smoke. They then floated around the group of 4. We really do need to figure out how many you have, he said, then shook his head. But that will be for later, he looked at Hinata. I know we'll have Naruto's eyes out there. But I'd feel better knowing we had an extra layer of detection. Hinata, I want you to turn on your Byakugan at random intervals and scan the area. Hinata nodded. Hi, Shisui Sensei, she said. Shisui nodded and looked at Sasuke. Sasuke, I want you to stay alert, too, he said. You'll never know what could slip past these 2. Sasuke nodded. I will, he said. Then Team 11, move out, Shisui ordered as the shinobi squad broke into an even run. Their first crank had truly begun. Hours later, the members of Team 11 had left the forest surrounding Konoha and were now out in the open roads. Once more, Naruto was amazed at everything he saw. The forest had parted, opening up to a vast world. Until now, he had never seen this. All his life, he had lived in Konoha, and to him, it had been the world so big and vast that it could take him weeks or months to explore every corner. Then he stepped outside it, outside the forest that surrounded it. Now he could see how small his village was and how big the world was. He had his eyes ahead of him, and even as far as he could see, there was no end to the world. It just kept going on. Even the sky above him seemed more distant. He saw that Shui was smiling at him. "Pretty amazing, isn't it?" he said. "I remember my first time outside of the village. And I'm not talking about some small excursion into the forest the academy sometimes does. It was when I had my first crank with my team. We were escorting this merchant back to his village. It was a dull mission, but I remember how excited I was at leaving the village for the first time." While Naruto kept his attention on the roads ahead. He was focused on Shisui-sensei's story. "What was it like?" he asked. Seeing all of this, he gestured to the world around them. Shisui's smile grew fonder. "Probably about the same way you're feeling now," he said. "Konoha is a big place. There's no denying that. To a kid that grew up in it, it might seem like Konoha and its forest are the whole world. That there is nothing past it. Then you leave it and take that first step out of the forest, and you realize just how small it is. Konoha is not the world, but it is just outside its walls." Naruto nodded and turned his attention back on the road. It seemed to stretch on forever, and even then, Naruto had to wonder what lay at its end. What was past that? How much bigger was the world? "Shisui-sensei," Sasuke asked. "You've been to lots of places, right?" Shisui nodded. "Yeah, I have," he said. "What are they like?" Sasuke asked. "How do they compare to Konoha?" Shisui looked on at the road. "I can't really say," he answered after a short pause. "I've been to so many different places and met so many different people. I don't think it is fair to compare any of them to Konoha. To me, Konoha is my home, and it will always hold a special place in my heart. Sure, some places aren't really much of anything, and places I would rather never visit again. But the others, though, had their own charm. Whether it be the sights or feelings around them or even the people that live there. They hold a special place in my heart as well. Trust me when I say that there is a whole world out there. Do you think we'll ever see it all?" Naruto said in wonder. Shisui shook his head. "Even if we to live 1,000 years, I doubt we'll be able to," he said. "Listen to your sensei, Kit," Kurama said. "I have been around since the days of the Sage of Six Paths, many thousands of years ago. I have been to many places and seen many things, but not even I have not seen all corners of this world. And I may never." "But aren't you immortal or something?" Naruto said to the fox. "Don't you have all the time in the world?" "I may have all the time in the world. But the world moves on," Kurama said. "A great city may rise in a distant corner of the world and last for 1,000 years, then tumble to dust in another 1,000 and be forgotten by the third. And I would have noticed simply because I was not in that corner of the world." Naruto thought about Kurama's words and realized how much wisdom they had. "Something on your mind?" Shisui asked, taking Naruto out of his thoughts. "Sorry Shisui-sensei," Naruto said. "I was just thinking about something that Kurama said." "Kurama?" Shisui questioned. Then he realized who Naruto was talking about. "Oh right, your tenant." Naruto nodded. "He was just saying how even he hasn't seen everything in this world," he said. And expressed his doubts he would ever. "But isn't he Biju?" Shisui asked. "Won't he live forever or something?" Naruto nodded. Then he gave Shisui and the rest of his team the same analogy that Kurama gave him. Shisui had a thoughtful expression on his face, while Hinata and Sasuke still looked a little confused. I see, he said. I can see where your friend is coming at. Time erodes all things. Even the mountains and forests will one day disappear. Naruto nodded. I guess that's another thing to remember, he said. To see a place while it is still there. While it can still be remembered. He saw Shisui smile. As I said before, the life of a shinobi is a hard one, he said. It is filled with hardship and sacrifice. But it is also a rewarding one. We will do and see things that ordinary people can only begin to dream of. We get to travel across the elemental nations and see places that, for most, only exist on a sheet of paper. Naruto nodded. There's so much to see out there, he said. I know I won't be able to see all of it in my lifetime. But I want to see as much of it as I can. The rest of the day passed by them as they continued to travel. When the sun started to set, Shisui had them stop on the side of the road for the night. By the time they had set up camp and eaten, night had fallen. They would have a rotating watch. One would stay up for a couple of hours and keep watch while the others would sleep. Then would switch out for one of the others. Naruto was the first one on the watch. It was especially easy for him since he had his eyes spread out across the area, and while he slept, his eyes could keep an eye out for things. It also let him gaze up at the stars. Once more, the young genin was struck with how different it felt from being in Konoha. He had seen them before in the village and even watched them from one of the parks in the village. But never before did they seem so bright and numerous. Even the stars are different out here, he said. I don't think I have ever seen so many out in the night. That's because we're out from the village, Naruto heard a voice say next to him. Shisui walked up beside him and sat down on the ground. The lights from the village wash out the lights from the stars. I think they call it light pollution or something. Naruto nodded, he turned his head to look up at the night sky. So they're always up there, he said. Just drowned out. Shisui nodded. Something like that, he said. I was a little surprised, too, when I saw them. It really does make you feel small when looking at them. Naruto nodded, having gotten that feeling. There's so many of them, he said. What are they really? Shisui looked at him with curiosity. The stars, Naruto said. What are they? Are they just tiny little lights in the night sky? Or are they something more? Shisui looked up at the sky and smiled. That's not a bad question to ask, he said. I've heard people say each star is the light of other worlds. Naruto turned his head to face Shisui. The light of other worlds? Naruto questioned. Shisui nodded. Yeah, each of those lights are other worlds, shining down on us. Shisui let out a small snort. So maybe on another world, ours is just another light that shines down on them. Naruto looked at the stars with newfound wonder. Kurama, he said to the fox. What do you think? He heard a snort coming in his head. I could care less what stars are, Kurama said. They have always shined down on this world. And they are one of the few unchanging things in this life. So it doesn't matter what they are, they will always be there. In short, Naruto said with a mental eye roll. You don't know, he heard another snort, then his mind fell empty. There is another that people think they are, Shisui said, unaware of the short exchange. It's similar to what I told you but interesting nonetheless. How so? Naruto asked. That those stars are suns, Shisui said. Like our own, and that each sun shines down on another world. Sounds like pretty far-fetched stuff, doesn't it? And the bit with them being other worlds, isn't? Naruto pointed out. Shisui shrugged. They both do, to be honest, he said. But we'll never really know. Will we? Naruto must on the thought for a bit. Not unless we can travel to them or look at them somehow, he said. But I guess that's not really something we can just do. Shursui snorted. Then again, we do live in a world where we can throw out fireballs and summon giant animals. Hell, he pointed to Naruto's stomach. You got a giant nine-tailed fox sealed in your gut. Hello, said Fox quipped. So, I guess anything is possible, he said. Then he took a deep breath and let out. But we got other things to do right now, like completing this mission. Or you getting to bed, your watch ended a little bit ago. Naruto smiled and turned his head down at the ground. I was wondering when you would say that, he said. I guess we got a little sidetracked. Shursui shrugged. It can be a good thing, he said. I liked the little conversation we had. Naruto nodded. It's like you said, Naruto started. There's so much more out there. Our world has just opened up, and it's a little overwhelming. Shursui smiled. I think everyone gets like that when they leave their home for the first time, he replied. They see how big the world is and how small they are in comparison. But they keep going on. Then he looked back at Naruto. Get some sleep. I'll take over for my watch. Naruto nodded and stood up. I'll keep some of my eyes active, he said. Shursui gave him a worried look. Won't that stop you from sleeping? He asked. Naruto shook his head. Only if I have a lot of active eyes, he said. I can put my eyes into something of a passive stat, where it's like I closed them. That way, I can sleep. He rolled up a sleeve showing the seals on his arm. Remember, I didn't always have these. How else do you think I got any sleep? That's a fair point, he said. You said you would keep a few active? Naruto nodded. I can have some activity without disrupting my sleep. The only thing that will happen is the images will be mixed into my dreams. So, I don't do it often. Shursui nodded. Well, all right then, he said. You have a good night's sleep. Naruto nodded. You too, Shursui-sensei, he said, then walked away. He arrived at the tent he was sharing with Sasuke. Hinata had her own separate tent. The Uchiha boy was sound asleep on one side of the tent. Naruto took the other and laid down. He was lying down on his back, so he was looking up. He still had some of his eyes looking up at the stars. There really is so much more to see, he thought. I never knew that the world was this big. He heard a snort coming from within his mind. Trust me, Kit, Kurama said. You have yet to see anything. But I suspect that you will live to see many things and places. Today was just the first steps towards those things. Naruto mentally nodded at the fox. Kurama, he addressed the Biju. You've been around a long time, right? Like for thousands of years? He felt the questioning expression coming from Kurama. I thought that was well established, he said. But yes, I have been. You think you can tell me about some of the places you've seen? Naruto asked. You know, before I fall asleep, he could already feel the edges of sleep tugging at his mind. From within the seal, Kurama smiled. Very well then, he said. I think we have time for one story. Naruto smiled and turned over to his side as he listened to the story Kurama had to tell. His first day outside of Konoha had not been an eventful one. But it had opened the world up to the young Uzumaki. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.